It was fall 2015. Rachel and I, my wife, we just got married a couple months earlier, 2 months, I believe, and we took our very first family trip together. We went up to Sacramento to see my grandma, my dad's mom. And so my parents were with Rachel and I. My sister was with us. We hopped on a plane, did the 50-minute flight up to Sacramento. We got there, and it was about an hour drive outside of Sacramento to get to my grandma's house. And my grandma, she lives in a small trailer. And so when we go and visit her, there's no way for us to all fit in there together. It's just too small. And so we always stay at a hotel about 5 minutes away, if that. And so it's like midnight, and we get into this hotel lobby. We'd just gotten off the flight, driven an hour. And as is usual the case, you walk up to the lobby, the receptionist, you go to check in, and we're, hey, we got a couple of rooms here under a mark or whatever. And the receptionist, he asks a couple questions. He pauses. And so we're kind of disturbed at this. And then he looks at us and he gives the words, your reservation isn't for tonight. It starts tomorrow night. And we're like, oh, no, you got to have something wrong. So my mom actually, she pulls out her iPad and she shows proof of the reservation starting that night that we were in. And to my mom's credit, she actually also had printed off like the receipts. And so she's showing the receptionist lobby guy at the hotel, no, we have proof here. This is confirmation. Our reservation starts tonight. And he doesn't know what to do. He does a couple more things on his computer. And then he ushers these famous words. Sorry, we have no rooms available tonight. I mean, this was like straight out of the Christmas story. Like, we have no rooms in the inn for you, Mary and Joseph. I mean, this is what it felt like. And, we're kind of thinking, okay, this is a huge problem, but we'll just go to another hotel. Well, the problem was, at that time, there were quite a few fires up in that region of Northern California. And because of that, Edison and all the utility companies were all up there with their cars, and they had booked all the hotels. So in the parking lot, it was just full of Edison trucks, meaning every hotel in that area was booked. There were no other rooms available, not just at this hotel, but every hotel. We call around. The nearest hotel available with a room is back at the Sacramento airport, an hour away. Now it's like 1 o'clock in the morning. We're just standing there, and we get angry. And not just angry, we're actually full, now at this point, of outrage. And here's what happens. He ends up finding a room in the hotel, but this is where it gets good. It's a smoking room, and it's just one room. And this one smoking room just has one bed, and they don't have any pull-out beds or any of the extra stuff. So now my family and I, we're in the lobby, and we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. And you got to know, Rachel and I, we just got married. This is her first ever family trip with the Lohmans. My mom, my dad, my sister. So here's what we do. My dad decides he'll go back to his mom's house. He'll sleep on the couch. And because, Rachel's my wife, we just got married. I don't want her to go into the smoking room. I don't want my parents because of their age. And so it's kind of like, okay, my sister and I, we're going to have to do the sacrifice, and we're going to take the smoking room. And then my wife, Rachel, and my mom, they're going to go back to my grandma's house and share a twin bed. And a twin bed that has a missing leg, so the bed is actually slanted downwards. And so you got to picture them head to toe together. My mom's feet are in my new wife's face, and my new wife's feet are in my mom's face. Sleeping together, folks. And then my sister and I go into the smoking room with the one bed, and obviously we haven't been in the same bed together for like 20, 25 years, and there we sleep together, cuddling together, and breathing in smoke. As I told my wife, welcome to the Lohman family. We are full of outrage. Here's what happens. My sister, you got to know, long week for her. She was frustrated. Her husband wasn't with her. 2:00 in the morning now. My sister just throws her luggage across the lobby. And when I say throw, I mean literally, she tosses her luggage. I get on the phone. I'm calling up like the Better Business Bureau or whatever, and I'm complaining. I'm like, we need this company, this hotel is horrible customer service. I think my parents are like just full of outrage at the poor hotel receptionist. I mean, I don't think it was his fault, but we're all just complaining, full of outrage. I think we asked, like, we want free stays here for a year, whatever. But we're full of anger, and not just anger, but outrage. Now that's it's funny now, it wasn't in the moment, story. But I don't know about you, but I feel like that actually feels like in some capacity everyday life now in 2020. Anger has become normal this year, every single day, and outrage, it seems like, is a daily occurrence. See, as this series suggests, we are living in a culture of outrage right now. I mean, all you have to do is like turn on the news, turn on your Facebook, Twitter, scroll through. People are demonizing one another. They're full of hatred towards one another. I mean, it doesn't matter what political tribe you're in, whether you wear a mask, you don't wear a mask. People are like full of outrage to one another. Someone just told me a week ago, and this is a good friend of mine, they had to block their sister online because it was getting that intense over political things on social media. It is insane. The amount of short-fused, outrage-driven, polarized, and I'm talking just Christians alone, is insane. I've never seen our culture like this. And so we're no longer just angry. Anger has turned into outrage, and outrage is like the new anger in 2020 American culture. And so here's what I want to ask us this morning. What do the scriptures say about anger, about outrage? What do we do with our anger right now in 2020? Is our anger good? Is our anger bad? And more importantly, actually at the core of this is this question. What is the difference? Is there a difference between anger and outrage? Because I actually think there's a really important nuanced difference that changes this conversation as it pertains to anger and outrage. So if you have a Bible or on your phone, wherever, let's turn to James, the book of James, towards the end of the New Testament. James chapter 1. I'm going to be reading just two verses 19 through 20. Here's what we read. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. First thing this morning, and this is actually really important, nowhere in the scriptures, and maybe this shocks you, nowhere in the scriptures is anger bad, is anger sinful. Anger by itself is not sinful. But notice what James says. He says to become slow. Be slow to become angry. Anger's fine, but do it slowly. Second thing, did you catch what James mentions in this same conversation about anger? What does he mention first? What does he mention before he addresses the topic of anger? He says, be slow to speak, or quick to listen and slow to speak. This is so important for our culture right now. Like, I think this is a verse that we need to memorize, put it on your fridge. Better yet, for some of us, put it on your steering wheel. We are so quick in our culture right now to be reactive, impulsive, and just to say things right away to people without processing and reflecting on what's bubbling up inside of us. I love how the Message puts it. Lead with your ears, follow up with your tongue, and let anger straggle along in the rear. Thirdly, when we talk about anger, we also have to talk about love. And maybe that seems like a paradox to you, but part of love is actually listening to and understanding the side of the other. Now, here's where nuance is really, really, really important. Loving someone doesn't mean that you need to agree with them. You can radically disagree with someone and radically love them. But when we love someone, we do need to listen to them. We need to understand their position. And I think we get these confused because if someone disagrees with you, I think we automatically want to say, oh, you're not listening to me. You don't get me. And that's not always true. You can disagree with someone and completely be listening to them and understanding where they're coming from. And just because you don't change your mind on something doesn't mean that you don't love them. Doesn't mean that you're not listening to them, that you don't understand them. You can listen to someone and understand them and love them and still disagree with them. The problem is in our culture, we've divorced love and anger. That's our problem. And the whole point of anger, and this is kind of my point this morning, the whole point of anger, at least righteous anger, is love. Anger and love are actually not at odds. They actually complement one another. Now, you may be asking, what in the world does that look like, Mark? I've never seen that before. This is why it's so helpful to look at the life of Jesus. Jesus models perfectly, better than anyone else, what it looks like to be full of anger and actually to still love someone. Passage, let's turn to Mark. If you go to the Gospel of Mark, Mark chapter 3. Mark chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. Here's a scene that we read. Another time, Jesus went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. And some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus. And so they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. And Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand up in front of everyone." And then Jesus asked them, "Which is lawful on the Sabbath? To do good or to do evil? To save life or to kill?" But they remained silent. And here it is, verse 5. He looked around at them in anger and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts. And he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." And he stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. Jesus was undeniably and completely angry at these religious leaders. See, Jesus was mad because they were trying to put him in a trap. They were trying to force Jesus to choose between obeying a religious Sabbath law or working and saving and healing this man with a shriveled hand. Here's what I want you to reflect on. What does Jesus' anger lead to? In this story, what does Jesus' anger lead to? It led to restoration, salvation, healing, life. See, Jesus was angry, but his anger was grounded in and used for the purpose of love. Now, there's a couple other stories I could take us to. We could go to the famous story of Jesus turning the tables in the temple. There's actually a story of him accepting children, and he gets mad at his disciples. Great story. But in summary, here's the picture that begins to emerge in the scriptures. We begin to see how anger works. See, Jesus wasn't angry over like small petty issues. Jesus wasn't angry over someone's political comments on Facebook. He wasn't angry on like the whole mask thing. Jesus was angry over matters of life, over acceptance, over salvation, over healing and restoration. Jesus' anger, it wasn't petty. It wasn't preferential. His anger was actually grounded in love. There's this great metaphor for anger that Pastor Scott Sauls writes about in a book that I read a couple months ago. The book's called A Gentle Answer. And he says this. This is so good. Anger can be compared to fire. Fire, like anger, has a lot of redeeming uses. It protects and warms us in the colder months. It creates lovely ambiance with a fireplace or candle. And it kills the destructive bacteria residing in our food. But if we don't keep fire inside boundaries, if we let it run wild, then it has the potential to destroy an entire house or forest or human life. Let fire rage, and it will steal, kill, and destroy whatever and whomever lies in its path. Where do you see this metaphor ringing true in your life? Where in your life has righteous anger actually been really helpful? And where has fire of outrage caused serious damage in your relationships? And see, this is where we have to look at and we have to separate and see the difference between anger and outrage. There is a big difference between anger and outrage. There are healthy forms of anger, and then there are really toxic, unhealthy, non-biblical forms of anger, which is exactly what outrage is. And by the way, outrage is called sinful in the scriptures. Ed Stetzer, he wrote a book called Christians in the Age of Outrage. And he has this really, really, really helpful section where he compares the two. And he offers 3 traits of righteous anger. And then he offers 6 traits of outrage or unrighteous anger. And so I want to go through these, and I want you to use this as a way to reflect and funnel on, okay, is my anger, is it like the healthy biblical kind? Or is it really the more biblical outrage type? So here are the 3 ways that you can assess if your anger is righteous. First, righteous anger is directed towards things that anger God. Meaning, is your anger, is it motivated by the same things that God gets angry at? Well, what does God get angry at? God gets angry at injustice, corruption, immorality, hypocrisy, oppression of the poor and the needy. Do you get angry over that, or do you get angry of like when someone cuts you off on the freeway? Do you get angry like when you get pickles on your cheeseburger, even though you've said no pickles? That never happens to me. Do you get angry over like the slow driver in the fast lane? See, Jesus, he didn't get angry over petty things. He got angry over areas of justice and life. I mean, I think there's something to Proverbs 26:4. Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you yourself will be just like him. See, I think healthy anger, according to Proverbs 26, it picks and chooses what it wants to battle with. What do you get angry over? What do you get angry about? I think a lot of us get so worked up over smaller things in life because we're not in a worthy fight for real issues that matter that we should get angry about. Mike Erie says, we're looking for a fight because we're not in one. If we're fighting for the kingdom, we don't have time for little things. Secondly, righteous anger mirrors the way of God. Righteous anger mirrors the way God is angry. Stetzer's point here is that God's anger is motivated by love. Is your anger, is it motivated by love and forgiveness? Or are you angry because you just want to hurt someone? You just want to put them down? Lastly, righteous anger submits to God's role as the ultimate judge. Romans 12:19, maybe you've heard this. God is speaking. He says, vengeance is mine, I will repay. See, if we're honest at times, actually most times probably, our anger and our justice is full of misunderstanding. God's never is. If we truly believe that God is a God of justice, then we can actually rest in that truth. Ultimately, that in the end, God is going to right every wrong. And what that means is I can let him sort it out. I don't need to get involved in revenge, in retribution, retaliating. I can be really calm and say, you know what, I'm angry, but you know what? God's going to deal with that, and I'll let him do that. He'll be far more just than I ever will be. Now, on the flip side, so that was righteous anger. Here are 6 characteristics of outrage, of like the unhealthy, toxic, sinful type of anger. The first one is this. Outrage is disproportionate. Classic example of this is road rage, right? It's when you like unleash waves of anger on someone for like a really small petty thing, and you go from 0 to 10 in like 2 seconds. If you call someone demonic on Facebook because they don't align with your political tribe, that would be a disproportionate type of anger. Secondly, outrage is selfish. Is your anger, is it about you? Is your anger about your needs, your wants, your desires, or is it about injustice? Are you venting and raging against someone because it makes you feel good inside? That sense, where you get relieved when you can like put someone down? That's actually selfish. Third thing, outrage is divisive. Is your anger, is it always about the other side? Is it always about the other political camp? You never get angry about people who agree with you. And if someone criticizes you or your position, game over. That's divisive outrage. Fourthly, outrage is visceral. What he means by this is that you don't take the time to reflect and to pause with your anger. You just react. You get angry, boom. You respond. You don't think about it. It's completely reactive. This is exactly how our culture is right now in our digital age of social media. We respond right away with rage. And that's actually scary, because if you're like me, usually what you say right away isn't the most smart or wise or kind thing. It usually ends up being stupid stuff. Fifth, outrage is domineering. Is the goal of your outrage, is it to shame, to silence, and to put down those you disagree with? That you don't care about truth. You don't care about nuance. Everything's black and white. Everything's a matter of winning or losing, who's in, who's out. That is a domineering, toxic form of outrage. Lastly, outrage is dishonest. This type of outrage isn't interested in truth or fairly representing the other side. Instead, you just attack someone's character. You just say bad things about them. You assassinate their reputation. You misrepresent your opponent's position. That is outrage, and that is dishonest. Now, with all of that in mind, righteous anger, outrage, here's the question that I want to ask you right now in this cultural moment. With your anger, and we all have anger. Anger by itself is not wrong, right? Can you actually be like Jesus? Meaning, how can you use your anger to actually bring life to a situation, to bring healing, restoration, salvation. Mike Erie, who I quoted earlier, he has this short little sentence. Anger has a place in the Christian life, just not the place that we give it. Anger has a place in the Christian life, just not the place that we give it. Is your anger like Jesus's, where you're angry out of and for love? I mean, let me ask you this. What's the end game of your anger? What's the end game of your anger? Is it to just divide, to inflame, to get your last word in, or is it actually to build others up? Every single human being longs for someone to take what is wrong and to make it right. See, followers of Jesus, we can get angry without sinning because we know that not only do we have a Father, but we have a Father who's a just defender who will one day right every single wrong, and He can do that and we don't have to. As Pastor Scott Saul says, it is only those who know this that will be able to lose their cool, like Jesus' outburst in the temple, hating what is evil, but clinging to what is good. And listen to this, without losing their character. We can lose our cool, but not lose our character. Scott, as he continues to write in this book, A Gentle Answer, he says, actually, there's one other thing that God gives us to help us out with our longing for justice, with our natural feeling with anger. It is actually the exact same gift that He gave Martin Luther King Jr. 60 years ago during the whole civil rights movement. It's the gift of non-retaliation. And you got to know, I mean, obviously in that time, MLK Jr., as an African American, I mean, he was getting death threats. He was hated on. I mean, if you were African American then, I mean, and this is still the case now, you're hated and insulted. They had every single right to be full of anger and retaliate. And MLK Jr., as a follower of Jesus, received the gift of non-retaliation. And that's how he responded to them. God gives us that exact same gift today. I want to end this morning with Scott Sauls. He gives these powerful biblical words. And I want to end with this. He writes, God, who had every right to retaliate against us, to turn the tables upside down on us and put us in our place once and for all, chose not to. For God demonstrates His own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And He did so not when we were at our best, but when we were at our worst. Not when we were compassionate and gentle and kind, but when we were mean and belligerent and cruel, while we were still sinners, denying, insulting, ignoring, abusing, and crucifying Him. That is when Christ died for us. This is the power of a gentle answer turning away wrath. This is the power that enables us to expel the poison of toxic anger and to instead give expression to anger motivated and moved by love. The gospel, Jesus, is the power that we have to get rid of poison, toxic anger, and to instead express our anger by and for love. What is your anger like? Is it grounded in love? Is it used to bless? Or is it selfish, divisive, domineering, dishonest? Let me pray for us, and then I'll close us with our benediction. Will you join me in prayer? Father, we do come before you and we confess we are sinners. Often I have anger inside of me that bubbles up that I allow to turn into outrage, to turn into sin, and I give the devil a foothold. And Lord, I confess that this morning. And especially in our age right now, Lord, more than ever, we know that we need to be people that are angry, but angry at what you're angry at, and react the way that you want us to. May we be known for that, Jesus. Be with us this week as we hopefully reflect on James 1, Mark 3. Minister to us, Father. It's in your name that we pray. Amen. Hey, as we go, I want to reread for you as a benediction, James 1. If you're able to, wherever you're at, if you're not driving, if you could just open your hands up with your palms up as just a symbol of receiving, of sacrifice. And I'm going to read James 1 for us as our closing benediction. Hear these words. Enter your week with this invitation. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Go in this invitation. Have a great week. Hopefully we see you Wednesday night. God bless you. Happy Thanksgiving. Have a great week.